Welcome to the MD Edge Daily News for August 7th. I'm Nick Andrews.
And I'm Terry Rudd. Today, 4 different syndromes may point to life-threatening PVL-positive staph infection.
Also today, the ratio of asthma medication identifies high-risk pediatric patients.
And later, new MS criteria may create more false positives.
But we begin today with an FDA warning against azithromycin in blood or lymph node cancers. The Food and Drug Administration has issued a safety alert warning against long-term use of the antibiotic to prevent bronchiolitis obliterans syndrome, or BOS, in patients with blood or lymph node cancers who have received donor stem cell transplants. Patients with blood or lymph node cancers are at an increased risk of BOS after donor stem cell transplant. Azithromycin is not approved for prevention of this condition, but the antibiotic is sometimes prescribed for that purpose. Research from France examined nearly 500 patients to assess the effectiveness of this prophylaxis, but revealed instead the increased risk of relapse and death. The study was halted a little over a year after completing enrollment. The rate of cancer relapse was about 33% in the azithromycin group and less than 21% in the placebo group, according to results published in JAMA. BOS is marked by inflammation and scarring of the airways that leads to severe shortness of breath and dry cough. According to the FDA, there are no known effective antibiotic treatments to prevent the condition. Patients who have had a stem cell transplant and are already taking the antibiotic should consult a doctor before discontinuing. Zithromax maker Pfizer has issued a Dear Healthcare Provider letter about the safety issue. You can read more about the FDA's statement and find the JAMA study from France by clicking the link in the description.
During the past 2 decades, MRSA has gotten the blame as the main cause of a wave of community-acquired severe invasive staphylococcal infections in kids in the Western Hemisphere. However, many European pediatric infectious disease specialists believe that Panton-Valentine leukocidin is the real issue. Panton-Valentine leukocidin, or PVL for short, is a frequent co-traveler with methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Dr. Pablo Rojo is a researcher from Complutense University in Madrid. Dr. Rojo says it's only because there were so many MRSA cases early on that some researchers thought it was the driver of the disease. He says that remains unclear. Speaking at the annual meeting of the European Society of Pediatric Infectious Diseases, Dr. Rojo said he thinks it's mostly associated with PVL. He notes 4 key syndromes in previously healthy children and adults that point to a high likelihood of PVL. If you see those syndromes, don't wait for the lab report. Move fast to start appropriate empiric therapy. Those 4 syndromes are severe Staphylococcus pneumonia, severe osteomyelitis, osteomyelitis with deep vein thrombosis, and osteomyelitis with septic shock. There are no current randomized data to guide treatment. However, Dr. Rojo recommends the protocol used by the Lyon group. That protocol calls for a bactericidal antibiotic for the Staphylococcus aureus, coupled with a ribosomally active antibiotic to suppress the PVL toxin's virulence expression. Dr. Rojo also recommends using any of the commercially available intravenous immunoglobulin products, based on work done by Vanderbilt University researchers in Nashville.
And from MD Edge Chest Physician, an asthma medication ratio below 0.5 nearly doubles the risk of children ending up in the hospital with an acute asthma exacerbation. That's according to research presented at the Pediatric Hospital Medicine annual meeting in Atlanta. The asthma medication ratio is the number of prescriptions for controller medications divided by the number of prescriptions for both controller and rescue medications. The ratio has been around for a while, but it's mostly been used as a quality metric. This new study shows that it's also useful in the clinic to identify children who could benefit from extra attention. Children with a ratio below 0.5 are considered high risk. The proof of concept research included data from more than 200,000 children who had at least one claim for an inhaled corticosteroid. The researchers calculated AMRs for each child every 3 months over a 15-month period, About 9% of children at any given time had AMRs below 0.5. 25% of more than 17,000 children with an initial ratio below 0.5 had asthma-related events. The initial ratio couldn't be calculated in more than 100,000 children, which likely meant that those children had less active disease. Indeed, those children had the lowest proportion of asthma events. A ratio below 0.5 nearly doubled the risk of an asthma-related hospitalization or emergency department visit in the subsequent 3 months. That statistically significant finding prompted the researchers to conclude that serial asthma medication ratio helped predict exacerbations among Medicaid children.
And finally today, the revised McDonald criteria for multiple sclerosis have led to more diagnoses in patients with clinically isolated syndrome. But a new study of the criteria suggests that they may lead to a number of false positive MS diagnoses among patients with a less severe disease state. Dutch researchers analyzed data from 229 patients who had a clinically isolated syndrome and underwent MRI of the spinal cord to assess for dissemination in space. The researchers assessed patients using both the 2010 and 2017 McDonald criteria for MS. 124 patients met the 2010 criteria, and 74 patients developed clinically definite MS. In comparison, 149 patients met the 2017 criteria, and 89 went on to develop MS. Dr. Roos van der Verst de Vries is a researcher in the Department of Neurology at Erasmus MC in Rotterdam. She says the specificity of the 2017 criteria was significantly lower than the 2010 criteria, and earlier data show that the previous McDonald criteria lead to a higher number of MS diagnoses in patients who will not have a second attack. And that concludes this edition of the MD Edge Daily News. You can find links to these stories in the description. For MD Edge, I'm Terry Rudd.
And I'm Nick Andrews. The Daily News is published every weekday morning at 4 a.m. You can start your day with us. Subscribe today, wherever podcasts are found.